Hello, my fellow misfits. Welcome back to A Cult of Misfits. I'm Matt Owens. This one I've been talking about for a while. The day has finally come where I talk about, drumroll please, the Emerald Tablets. I want to talk about the Emerald Tablets, Hermeticism, the Egyptian god Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, the Kybalion, the Seven Hermetic Principles. Like, if any of those things, if you're getting goosebumps, this is the one for you. If you're anything like me and you enjoy talking about things that are of a spiritual nature, consciousness, the nature of reality, reincarnation, manifestation, the Nephilim, angels, demons, gods, the pyramids, if you like any of those things, check out other episodes of my podcast because I talk about them a lot. These are the things that I enjoy talking about. And I've had some really great conversations lately with my friend Nathan. So if you're interested, check those conversations out where we talk about all of those things and more. In the last episode, Nathan and I talked about Jesus. We happened to record it on Easter Sunday, so it only seemed appropriate. Talked about needing a savior, talked about a relationship with Jesus Christ, talked about religion in general. It was a really good talk. So check that out if that is of interest to you. And I just wanted to say thanks. Thanks to everybody who is listening, who is interacting with me and the podcast and my content. You can find A Cult of Misfits on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. The podcast is on Spotify and YouTube and Apple Podcasts. So if you're interested in my content, feel free to check me out on those other platforms. And I'm saying thank you to those of you that are following me and subscribing to my content. And for those of you that have donated financially, I appreciate you. I love you. If you're interested in reciprocating as well, donation information is below. So thank you again to everybody who has donated and continues to push this thing in the direction that we're headed. Happy to have you aboard. I love having these conversations. So before we dive into Hermeticism, a few days ago, I want to tell you a story about I was walking and just going on a walk. I was in this park. I was on this like gravel road, just going on a walk by myself. And I'd stopped to just sort of, do a little mind meld with the universe, just sort of soak in the nature. And as I was sitting there, I heard a bird sound nearby. And it was a bird sound that I didn't recognize. And not that I'm a bird expert, I don't actually know too many actual bird sounds, but it was one that I didn't recognize. And as I looked around, I realized there wasn't a bird anywhere near me. But standing about 6 feet away from me was instead a small, like a young a Japanese girl. Okay. There's this Japanese girl standing next to me, and she smiles at me and proceeds to walk away from me. And as she does, I kind of laugh because she's wearing, it looks like it's something from like a movie set or something, or like, you know, Tokyo 50 years in the future, like this very futuristic thing. She's wearing like this backpack from the future. And the backpack is made out of like this translucent, hard plastic bubble, right? Like it's very artfully designed. It looks like a movie set, a movie prop, movie prop. And so she's walking away from me like it's no big deal as she wears this futuristic backpack. And inside of the backpack, I can see into it because it's clear. There's a wooden stick, and perched on the wooden stick is a parakeet. The sound of the bird was a parakeet inside of this woman's freaking translucent backpack. And she's just walking away like that's a completely normal thing to walk around the park with. So I didn't recognize the parakeet squawking. And I thought that was the craziest thing that happened to me this week. And I wanted to share that with you. And as I was thinking about this story, I was trying to think like, well, I wonder how many birds I was thinking, well, I don't know that many bird sounds, but I thought like, well, I could I could probably get about 10 or 12 of them. And it turns out about 10 or 12 is about how many bird sounds I know. So I wrote them down for your pleasure. If you'd like to play along, I'm going to tell you the names of birds whose sounds that I recognize. Here we go. The first one turkey. That one's an obvious one. The turkey gobbling. Hummingbird, a crow, a goose. Are you with me, guys? A seagull, a duck, an eagle. We have a lot of bald eagles around here, so I'm really into the eagle screeching. And I just, throw my fist into the air and shout freedom as loud as I can. Anytime I hear one of them boys screeching. Eagle, and then I thought of chicken, but then I also thought of rooster. So I don't know if that counts for two or not. It's basically the same animal. Parrot, I can recognize their sound. An owl, a pigeon, and a penguin. And that sort of rounds out. I was going to write down ostrich, but I technically don't know what an ostrich sounds like, even though I'm sure if I heard one, it would be obvious that it was an ostrich. So that's kind of like a half point for me. But fun little game. If you guys want to play along, you can write down how many bird sounds you know. In fact, leave them in the comments. How about that? Leave them in the comments below. Let me know all of the birds that you know. If you want to try to outshine me, that's fine. That's fine. I don't have to take all the glory in terms of avian sound knowledge. Okay, let's dive into Hermeticism, guys. Let's see. Hermeticism is basically just, for those of you who don't know, I've dove into all of this before, and it's been a couple of years, so it was really just I felt led to sort of brush up on all of this again, and so that's why I dove in. And as I'm watching these YouTube videos and listening to these podcasts, I'm like, oh yeah, it's all coming back to me now. I love all of this esoteric knowledge and wisdom, but my problem is I've got a low retention rate with my brain. My brain doesn't really latch onto everything that goes through it, and so I often have to sort of go back, and restudy things to try to cement it into the old gray matter. So um, Hermeticism is kind of just this umbrella term. It's based on Hermes Trismegistus, who is this Greek god who is based on an earlier god from the Egyptians that is known as Thoth, Thoth. Thoth. That's the god with the ibis head, that bird. Speaking of birds again, it's a real bird heavy episode, guys. So I hope you're with me. You enjoy birds as much as I do. The bird headed god, the ibis with that curved, long beak that looks like Gonzo from the Muppets. No disrespect to either Gonzo or Thoth, but they could be related. Um, so Hermes Trismegistus is this Greek god that's based on a previous Egyptian god Thoth, who allegedly is based on previous deities from Atlantis or the previous civilization that was here before the flood. Okay. So Hermeticism is basically this broad umbrella term that covers kind of it's these broad philosophies and beliefs about esoteric knowledge, mysticism, occultism, spiritualism, the nature of reality, and alchemy, and transmutation, and the purification of our souls, and sacred geometry. And so it's just all of these texts that allegedly were written by this god, Hermes Trismegistus, or Thoth, kind of same deal. And so that is sort of what we're talking about here. That's the sort of subject matter that our boy Hermes was talking about. Now, Hermes Trismegistus is one of the greatest names of all time, in my opinion, because Trismegistus means thrice great, three times great. Like that guy, I don't know if that was his ego talking or what, but like that's a pretty badass name to go around like a baller saying, yeah, I'm thrice great. What are you going to do? So Hermes Trismegistus was the Greek version, and then later on he sort of morphed into the Romans called him Mercury. Okay, so it's Mercury, Hermes, Thoth. They're all kind of the same deal. There's a word for that, by the way, that I just learned for those of you that like this sort of thing. The word is syncretism. Syncretism, 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 and it's sort of um, that way that civilizations sort of draw upon previous civilizations and sort of rebrand the gods as their own version of it and say like, yeah, we've got a god of commerce as well, but we call him this, you call him that, whatever, tomato, it's the same thing. So anyway, there's a bunch of literature that was allegedly written by this guy, Hermes Trismegistus, this god. And they call sort of the body of work the corpus hermeticum, which means the body of Hermes, I think, in Latin. And it's just sort of his body of work. So there's a bunch of different scripts and books that are within that, under that umbrella title. But the one that stands out the most, that's separate from the corpus hermeticum, is the emerald tablets. So there's the emerald tablets of Hermes, and it's this um, it's the emerald tablets were never found, so it's not like they physically exist somewhere that we know of. The only reason we know about these emerald tablets of Hermes Trismegistus is because it's written about in other scripts and ancient tablets and stuff after the fact, and so they're all referencing these tablets as if they do exist somewhere, but nobody knows where they are. Now it has like 13 to 15 different verses on it, depending on whose translation you're looking at. Sir Isaac Newton translated it back in the day. It's been translated by lots of people over the thousands of years. So it's just sort of this cryptic thing with about 12 verses. This is where we get the idea of as above, so below. That comes from these emerald tablets. It just sort of is brief and cryptic. It definitely says as above, so below. It talks about how everything is one. It sort of talks about inner transformation. And this is all sort of like depending on who translates it, because it's kind of open to interpretation and it's meant to be sort of cryptic and you got to kind of read between the lines, sort of a deal. Um, and that's it. So you can check that out online. The translations are done online, and they're not very. I was going to repeat them here for you, but they're kind of boring, to be honest with you. And it just basically says everything is one, as above, so below, that sort of idea. And then I started looking into these emerald tablets of Thoth, the Atlantean, and apparently they're separate from the emerald tablets that we're talking about now. And as I started looking into it, I started realizing that it wasn't what it appeared to be. So if you're going to look online and you see the emerald tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, these were there was this guy named Dr. Dorial. In the 20th century, he allegedly found these emerald tablets of Thoth the Atlantean. He was the only one who knew how to translate them. He translated them, but then, mysteriously never told anybody where the actual original tablets were, so nobody could go and verify it. So that was really sketch. And then he, had this translation of it that alleged certain things, and it was kind of similar to the real emerald tablets of Hermes. But his version was a little wonky, and then he kind of started a cult called the White Temple or something, and I think he was kind of involved with Madame Blavatsky and sort of that occultism circle of people that were kind of around the late 1800s, early 1900s, that sort of thing. Um, so that one seems a little bit sketch. So I sort of threw out all information that I found on the emerald tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, but of course you're more than welcome to dive into it and look into it for yourself. But that's just sort of my own conclusion. Um, so anyway, that's the emerald tablets. That's it. It's just this short, 12 to 13 verse body of work that just sort of is cryptic and not that meaningful. But when you put that in conjunction with all of the other things that Hermes allegedly wrote, then it sort of starts to explain more about these hermetic philosophies and ideas that he was trying to pass on to humanity. There's this idea, and it's told in many of the flood stories, these ancient stories across the world, in Asia and Mesopotamia, in the Americas. They all talk about how there was a great flood, right? But then after the flood, there's always talk of some sort of a deity coming down from the heavens, usually, sometimes up from the waters, to deliver knowledge to humanity after the flood to restart civilization again, giving them knowledge, oftentimes it's portrayed as a pine cone, like the pineal gland. It represents knowledge, passing on this knowledge to humanity, knowledge of agriculture and mathematics and, things to start civilization, right? So Hermes Trismegistus or Thoth are both believed to be that being, according to the Greeks and the Egyptians and theoretically the Atlanteans, that had this idea. Well, I guess the Atlanteans were pre-flood, so maybe they didn't have that idea because they weren't around for the passing of the knowledge. They were drowned. They drowned, guys. Sorry to RIP, guys. But shout out to Atlanteans. Sorry, guys. Sorry, I had to go. Um, so you start looking at some of the other works by Hermes in this corpus hermeticum, this body of his work, and you get to have a little bit more of an expansion on these ideas of the cosmos and the beginning of how everything works and the different layers and realms to our reality. And Hermes does this through a dialogue with his disciples, and then a dialogue with Asclepius, who is the god of healing in the Greek pantheon. And so, through these dialogues, Hermes is able to explain to all of us what the hell is going on around here, and basically how to deal with starting civilization and the secrets and mysteries of the universe, and this mysticism, magic, alchemy, transmutation, the philosopher's stone type of stuff. All of that stuff, he starts passing on that knowledge to humanity. So in 1908, there was this book written called the Kybalion, Kybalion. Um, and it was written by an anonymous group. They called themselves the Three Initiates. Nobody really knows who wrote it, but essentially what it does is it boils down all of these hermetic writings into seven hermetic principles. So they take all of this knowledge and basically give it seven bullet points and break down exactly what Hermes was trying to say in a more modern, easier to understand way, in my opinion. It's still this very deep esoteric knowledge, but it's easier than reading, the ancient scripts, easier than reading the Corpus Hermeticum, right? So, if you haven't ever looked into the Kybalion, I highly recommend it. If you feel led to, if you get that little tingle, then I'm talking to you. It's meant to be. When I discovered the Kybalion, I it 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 it, cha- it changed a lot for me. It sort of opened up my mind in new ways and answered a lot of questions for me where I was at, where I had a lot of questions about the nature of the universe and things of that nature. And so I listened to it on YouTube or an audiobook or something, and it was like 4 hours long. It's very heavy, so you have to sort of be in that mode of like, absorbing this deep wisdom and this ancient knowledge, right? So you got to kind of be in the right frame of mind. But I thought I could break down the Kybalion for you and the seven Hermetic Principles, and just sort of briefly run through them so you can know what they are and you can dive into them deeper at a later date, right? So the first of these Hermetic Principles, and these are like essentially laid out as universal laws of the cosmos, right? So the first principle is mentalism, which is saying that everything within a reality is of the mind, of consciousness, that everything in our reality and in our universe is simply a manifestation of the universal mind, the mind of God, or the all that is, or whatever, however you want to say it, and that everything is simply a mental construct. And this also goes in line with, a lot of philosophies and religions around the world. A lot of Eastern philosophies also tell us, the Hindu philosophies and Buddhism, and they touch upon this idea, and they don't just touch upon it. It it's a major component of their belief system that all of this is an illusion, right? And later, the Greeks believed that. Plato talked about it with Plato's cave, that this is all emanations of our minds, and that all of these emanations are further emanations of the larger whole, the great universal consciousness. I've really been playing around with this idea lately. I talk a lot on the podcast about just the nature of reality and whether we're living in a simulation. And this is not a modern concept. This concept goes back to the very beginning of, when civilization started pondering these things and writing about these things and thinking about these things. And the ancients have across the board told us that none of this is real, and so I've really been trying to grapple with that lately. How does that affect my life? How does that affect how I proceed with my day-to-day living, knowing that there's a very good chance that all of this isn't real? In fact, the latest Nobel Prize that just went out in physics were these guys that were testing whether or not reality, um, oh, they used a specific phrase that's slipping my mind right now. They were I don't remember the exact scientific phrase, but it's does an apple does an apple stay red whether or not you're in the room or whether or not you're looking at it? And the answer is no, it does not. It further underlines previous. This is mainstream science stuff. For those of you that have heard me talk about it again, you know what I'm talking about. But there's mainstream science is pointing to what the ancients have also told us, that none of this is real, that the apple only exists when it is looked at. I don't know if you know this or not, but this is like science is over and over and over again proving to us, showing to us that none of this is real, that everything around us is just simply a soup of energy, that it's literally photons, aka light, that our entire reality is literally just light. And that when you zoom in, when you get powerful enough technology to zoom in on something, that there's something called the Planck limit. I'm going to get back to the hermetics here in a minute, but this is all important because it all has to do with what I'm talking about. That if you zoom in close enough on an object, like a table, for example, that eventually we get to a point where you can't zoom in anymore, because known physics and reality operating as we know it should completely ceases to operate that way. And basically our entire reality starts unraveling at a certain point when we start zooming in enough. And that blew my mind when I heard that. And the scientist that was explaining this on a podcast I was listening to was saying that the zooming in isn't even that deep into the simulation or into our reality, that it's really not even that deep, that it's sort of a shallow program that we have found ourselves in, that if you don't have to dig that deep for before it starts becoming obvious that none of this is real. So you can look into the double slit experiment if that sort of interests you. And you don't have to take my word for it, of course. I'm just repeating what mainstream science is telling us is happening, and how I'm going to live my life with that knowing that, well, none of this is real. And I suppose I can expand on that in a future episode. But it's an interesting thought, right? Like, how does that affect my life? And maybe I'm willing to be a little bit riskier. Maybe I'm willing to step outside my comfort zone a little bit more, knowing that at the end of the day, none of this is quote unquote real in the way that we've been told that it's real. So, anyway, the first, we'll go back to the seven hermetic principles. The first one is mentalism. It's saying everything is of the mind. The second principle is the principle of correspondence. This is where it talks about the concept of as above, so below, meaning that talking about the different realms and the different dimensions, perhaps, and saying that there is harmony between the higher and the lower planes of existence, that there are these laws and patterns and cycles that happen in the lower realms that are represented in the higher realms as well. Um, and so I just find that interesting, that it goes back to that concept that everything is interconnected, right? That everything is a reflection of the one, the all that is. That everything is simply a manifestation of the all that is, um, in fractal form, right? When you think about fractals, you can it's mathematically beyond my comprehension, to be honest with you, but the fractals maintain their shape and size no matter what like, I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this. The way that I understand it best is with holograms. If you have a glass plate that is a hologram, and it's a picture of the Eiffel Tower, for example, and you drop that holographic plate on the ground and it shatters into 100 pieces, each one of those 100 pieces are each going to contain one tiny Statue of Liberty. Every single one of them will have one tiny statue. You'll have 100 broken pieces of a Statue of Liberty. That's how the fractals work, where they're a small piece of the bigger thing, but they still maintain the everything within them, right? They still contain the Statue of Liberty within them. And so I think that that's what's going on in our reality, is that we have this fractal, this piece of the divine within us, the light of God within us, and we have the entire cosmos within us. We are the broken fragment of the all that is. We are the drop of water in the ocean of the all that is. And that's why when these spiritual teachers and the wisdom tells us that the entire universe is within us, I think that it's literally the entire universe is within us. We are a fractal of that larger concept, right? So let's go to the third one on the list. The third Hermetic principle is the principle of vibration. And that, again, is confirming what mainstream science tells us, is that everything is in constant motion. The atoms and the molecules and all the things spinning around, they're in constant motion, that everything is literally just energy. And we think that things have solid matter simply because that's how our human brains and our human senses and this avatar system that we're in are interpreting this energy of soup that is around us at all times, that we are at all times. And so this soup of energy is constantly in motion, that it's constantly vibrating at a certain frequency, right? And so you hear, talk of things having different frequency. Our thoughts have frequency. Our words have a frequency. The grass has a frequency, right? So the fourth Hermetic principle is the principle of polarity. That everything has its opposite. That it's dualistic in nature. But then it also talks about how that duality is also a part of the illusion of the universal mind. That it's actually a spectrum, that there is no hot and cold, for example, because hot, quote unquote hot, and quote unquote cold are simply matters of perspective, right? What you say is hot is maybe different than what I say would be hot. What is scalding? Is that hotter than hot, less than hot? What does that mean? Lukewarm, what does that mean? Right? They are all just different points upon this spectrum called temperature. And there's so many things that this analogy can be applied to in our lives, right? That everything is a spectrum, the political spectrum, right? And perhaps it's not a binary spectrum where there are two endpoints, but perhaps it's like the Mobius strip, or like the number 8, right? Where it just kind of loops back upon itself, whether it's the political spectrum looping back upon itself, or temperature, or whatever, right? Spirituality, right? What's on one end of that spectrum? I don't know. Depends on your belief, your perspective. I think that once we start to recognize these concepts and start maybe applying them into our own lives, like for politics, for example, and recognizing that there aren't opposite ends of the spectrum, that's just a matter of your perspective, and whether they're left of you or right of you or in the middle, or that's just all how you're perceiving it, right? They're all just different beliefs upon that spectrum. Number 5, the fifth Hermetic principle, is the principle of rhythm. It's talking about how the universe sort of operates on these patterns and cycles that just happen over and over and over again. That the universe and our lives have this rhythm to it, right? This pendulum that is swinging back and forth and back and forth, the ebb and the flow, not just cosmically or in nature, but also in our own lives, right? These seasons that we have, all these analogies that are used in these ancient texts, like the Bible, Jesus talked about it. You know, there's different seasons for everything, and the seasons always change. Sometimes the season that we are in seems to be taking forever, right? Sometimes we can be in a dark season. I've definitely been there many times. And when I'm in that dark season, it's very hard to remember that the light is around the corner, that springtime always comes. It's really helped me out to remember that the pendulum always swings. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. And then there'll be another round of darkness and then another round of light. And I've been practicing in my own life, trying to get more comfortable in all of the seasons, right? Knowing that there are going to be times of darkness, there are going to be, those winter seasons. And I've really been practicing, finding gratitude in those dark times. And that often helps me get through those dark periods that seem to take forever, that seem to be endless. That's like, am I ever going to get out of this dark pit? And so it's knowing these Hermetic principles, knowing this ancient knowledge and applying that, even though it's difficult to hear when I'm in that place. I don't want to hear that. I just want to get out of this uncomfortability now. But I'm meant to experience that uncomfortability, that depression, the darkness, So I take solace in knowing that nothing lasts forever. That's really gotten me through a lot of dark times. Knowing that there is this rhythm, knowing that it's a dance, knowing that sometimes I fall on my ass when I'm dancing, but that I'll get up again and the sunshine will be back again, the blue skies will be back again, and the darkness will seem like a thing of the past, right? It just seemed to take forever when I'm in it, but I take solace in knowing that the universe has a rhythm to it. So that leads us to the next one, which is number 6. The 6th principle is cause and effect. It talks about how every action has a corresponding reaction. Basically like karma, right? That whatever you do or whatever you put out into the universe will have an equal and opposite reaction. Very Newtonian. It also talks about how everything is a part of something larger, right? The microcosm is also the macrocosm. How it's all interconnected, how it's all one, and how it all connects to the other. As above, so below. And so the 7th and the last Hermetic principle talks about gender. It talks about how everything in the universe, everything in creation has this balance, this integration of both the masculine and the feminine energies, right? And I'm not necessarily talking about, and they were not necessarily talking about, gender, like sexuality, but it's more a vibe. It's more an energy. People have a masculine energy or a feminine energy, and it talks about harmonizing both of those within ourselves, right? That neither is right or wrong, but it's about balancing them, and whatever that means to you, or to society, right? I know often nowadays a lot of people complain about toxic masculinity, and whether I disagree or agree with it is a whole different topic. I haven't given it a lot of thought, to be honest with you, but it's about balancing that, right? There's a perceived imbalance of masculinity versus femininity in, let's just say, Western civilization right now, or maybe just in America. But the ancients talk about harmonizing that and recognizing that masculinity is not necessarily toxic, but that the imbalance can cause that toxicity, that suffering, right? Anytime there's imbalance, there's often suffering attached to it. So that concludes the Kybalion's Seven Hermetic Principles. And that kind of concludes my talk, I suppose. But it's sort of wrapped into, I've been thinking a lot about um, just the nature of reality, which I think about nonstop, and the afterlife. And I've been thinking about words like afterlife. And if everything is in our mind, and we're told by mainstream science and ancient wisdom that time is also an illusion, that the past and the future are figments of our mind, our imagination, our our human avatar interpreting this reality, this universe that we're in. But outside of this bubble, outside of this universe, I've been told by people who have been to the other side, out of body experiences, the ancient wisdom also tells us this. Science hints at it. They're diving into it a little bit deeper with mainstream science, that outside of this bubble universe that we are in, that time doesn't exist. There is no past, present, and future. It's all just happening simultaneously. And so if that's true, and which I believe that it is, then how can I start applying that to my life? Well, I've started, not that it's a bad thing, not that I'm slapping myself on the wrist when I say these words like afterlife or old soul. I started questioning myself, like, why am I saying old soul? Because old has to do with time. It insinuates something in the past, or it insinuates that I've been doing this for a while, or these are all concepts that have to do with time, and time doesn't exist. So the idea of old soul has to be tossed out the window, in my opinion. Then I start reading about the ancients talking about these concepts like death and then rebirth, and then, death and then rebirth, right? This cycle over and over again. But that also insinuates time. It insinuates that at some point I'm going to die, and then I'm going to transition, and then I'm going to reincarnate and be reborn again, and then, and then, and then. But and then insinuates that time exists, right? This is all just coming to me this week, where I'm just like, hold on. I'm starting to rethink everything, as always, right? It's always this stripping away process of taking what I think that I believe and how I perceive the world, and just turning it upside down and questioning it all. And so I'm always surprised when something new comes up, and I'm like, oh, okay. So what I sort of believe this week, it's always shifting and changing slightly, because I feel like this is all a game. This is all a puzzle, and I just love trying to learn more about the game, try to solve a little bit more of this giant puzzle that we call life, that we call reality, right? So what I'm starting to think, and this is sort of making sense if you stay with me. We're told that everything is one, correct? The Emerald Tablets, Hermeticism, ancient Egyptians, across the board, they're all saying everything is one. Okay, I get that. I think it's hard for a human mind to wrap around, but I'm getting better at, like, okay, everything is one. Now, what does that mean? So I'm playing with the idea that I am a divine being, and I am a part of the all that is. And I believe perhaps that I have created this universe that we are currently in, this weird bubble material 3D matrix, or womb or cosmic egg or whatever you want to call it. I believe that perhaps I, as the divine being, created this universe. Stay with me. And that everything within that universe, you, me, every living creature on the planet, the gray aliens, the Pleiadians, the gods, the demons, the devils, all of the things, the blades of grass, every molecule in this universe is literally the I am. I believe that I am simultaneously experiencing everything within this universe right now as we speak. My past lives, my future lives, my reincarnations, me living as the murderer, me living as the murdered, me living as gods, me living as beings that I can't comprehend, all within this created universe. And so when I hear that all is one, I'm wondering if I am literally everything and that I'm experiencing everything simultaneously. And you listening to this is just another facet of me listening to my own podcast, right? The divine podcast. What do you think about that? Stuff starts to make a little bit more sense when I think about it in that frame of mind. Because then, yeah, I am literally everything. And when this experience is over, then it's over. And I don't know if that's, let's just say that I am this divine being that is limitless, theoretically, right? And all powerful, all knowing, that sort of thing. Well, as a divine cosmic being, I would imagine that I don't get to incarnate into physical form that often. And so that would be quite a treat, I would imagine, as an infinite cosmic being. It might be fun to pop into a material world of my own creation. I believe that we're creator beings. I believe that as a creator being, I am living in my own creation right now. And that sounds fantastic, right? Just living every life simultaneously, experiencing every lifetime of every being in this known universe simultaneously. But then my human mind wants to say, okay, well, when does that end? Silly human. There is no time. It's not like the simulation begins with the Big Bang and ends somehow, some way. That's all talking about time again. It's tricky how deep that programming goes. And we're so ingrained and programmed to think about time this way, and it's just sort of a part of our vernacular and the way we frame everything and these philosophies and theories. It's like, yeah, but strip away time, and then it just kind of, you go, wait, huh? Doesn't make as much sense anymore, right? So I've been thinking a lot about time lately and how, if none of it's real, how does that reframe my thoughts of the universe, right? There isn't going to be a point when I die or when I was born. I'm experiencing my entire timeline right now simultaneously on the other side. It's a real trip, but it sort of answers a lot of questions for me about how it's very likely that this is a created world that only exists when something is looking at it or interacting with it, as proven by mainstream science. And so, yeah, I just feel like the idea of, the mysteries of the pyramids and, um, these energy centers on the planet, these sacred areas, these sacred sites, um, just all the portals and stargates and astral traveling and just all the weird stuff. That there's just a lot of weird stuff going on, and I think it's just a part of the game. It's all just a part of the simulation, meant to. It's I think it's all just meant for the expansion of our consciousness or our soul or whatever human word you want to use to talk about it, right? I think it's all for our pleasure, for our enjoyment, for our entertainment. even the times when we're suffering. I think that at the end of the day, our soul, our consciousness is loving every minute of it. That's what we signed up for. All the misery and the tears and the darkness and the fear, I think we signed up for it going, yeah, boy, that sounds fun. Right? As an endless cosmic being, that sounds like a real hoot. Right? But from the human perspective, it's like, holy shit, this is rough. Right? So that's what I'm thinking about this week. That's my current thoughts on the nature of this reality. Been thinking a lot about Hermeticism on the tablets. So again, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for sharing my content. It means a lot to me. Spreading the word to our fellow misfits out there who enjoy these types of conversation and these subjects. I appreciate all of you who've donated. Until next time, love you. End transmission.